Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Doula in the Desert podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Santos, and the first guest on my podcast is my lovely husband, Pedro. And today we're going to be talking about our journey with our Freebirth experience. And let's get started. Why don't you start with your initial reaction to me suggesting or letting you know that I wanted to have a free birth?
I was very against it. Just because I guess I got used to the comfort and not having to really do anything other than support you. Like if we had like we did with Lilith, our first daughter. And to me, it just seemed like, why would we want to take the risk of having a home birth if we can just go to the hospital and there they provide everything for us. So I guess, yeah, that I was just very apprehensive, and I think maybe like a little hostile as well, just because I felt like you were kind of like not letting me have a decision in the process. It was just kind of like, well, this is what I want, and I'm not gonna take no for an answer. So like I was a bit upset at the beginning, and I think that's like part of the reason why I was not trying to understand or like do my homework on like what exactly comes with a home birth as far as the risk. In my mind, I was already just kind of like shut off from it.
So I definitely didn't want a random person involved in such a sacred act, like my birth. I didn't want to have just random people coming in and out of my birthing space. And so I think at the time I was very emotional, like just in my nature I'm a very emotional person, but at the same time, like my first birth experience was very traumatic, which led to have my second birth, my second pregnancy. I had a VBAC, which was a vaginal birth after cesarean. So I did have a successful VBAC in the hospital. So I think you were more not understanding why I couldn't just have a hospital birth again, because we had already experienced a very successful, very smooth delivery with Lilith. But in my perspective, I was thinking, after I had experienced the birthing center and then versus the hospital, I really just wanted the opportunity to birth at home. And because I couldn't afford the midwife and I couldn't afford a provider to come into our home, I felt like God was, initially pushing me into like this space where it wasn't comfortable for both of us. And like even though I wanted to have a free birth, I was still scared, or like not scared, but I still had some fears, like the what ifs, what could go wrong, and weighing out the pros and cons. And I think that's where we both kind of met in the middle. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like once I started to voice like, look, I'm scared, or like I have my fears as well, but I know what my body can do. And that's initially, I think that's where my stubbornness rested. And you were like, okay, like she's not gonna budge from this, because I was determined to stand in my power in what I knew that my body could do. And I really felt like God was with me in that, and I knew that it was gonna take some convincing or persuasion on my end to get you on board. But like, what do you feel catapulted you into like, okay, let's do this?
For me, I think the turning point was after we had kind of like bumped heads a bit. I knew that something was gonna have to give, that one of us was gonna have to kind of compromise for the situation. And like in the back of my mind, I think, after we had kind of like those little bumps, I kind of started to like give in because I'm like, okay, like this is something you're very passionate about, and I never doubted in your mind that like this is something that like you can't do. It was just, I think for me, like me being scared of like in case something bad happened, and I wouldn't want to be in that situation, you know, because the only other, you know, like birth experiences that I've had up to that point was at the hospital and then at the birthing center. And both of those situations, it wasn't my job to deliver the baby, or, you know, they took care of you and I was just there to support you. But now it would be me having to support you and being the person that in case something bad happens, you know, I'm in charge of everything. So I was like pretty like terrified of that, of those possibilities. So when your doula did come over and we were talking about all the possibilities and I was asking her questions, I mean, I think even then, like, I might have still been kind of like apprehensive with her. But I think it kind of made me kind of just cemented, like, just made me accept, like, okay, this is happening, you know?
Yeah.
And she was, like, very helpful, and I had asked her, I think, like, you know, like, because she obviously has been doing a bunch of home births, so I was like, you know, like, what's, like, the worst thing that happened, or something along those lines, and she told me that she never really had, like, too many problems. So I was thinking, like, you know, like, as far as, like, the likelihood of something happening like that, I'm like, well, it's, for me, it sounds like the odds are like not too bad.
Yeah, the risks were
yeah,
not
like
as
the
high.
risks were not as high as I thought.
Right. Yeah, and I agree too, because at that point I was, you know, still kind of like on the fence about it, and I think that, you know, having her as our support emotionally during the pregnancy really helped as well. Yeah, so after we both got on the same page, what do you feel helped you prepare the most for the free birth? Because, you know, we got books, we watched a lot of other people's experiences on YouTube and different birth videos. And then we also, like I said, read a lot of books and prepared ourselves mentally as much as we could. But what do you feel like prepared you the most for the free birth?
For me, I think it was like there was like these two very good books that were like pretty short, but they had got a lot of good information in them as far as like what to do in case of an emergency. And at the back of the books, they had like the main like head bullet points of like just like kind of summarizing like the most important topics.
Yeah.
So just studying like those last few pages, it kind of like gave me like, okay, so these are like the main risk, and this is what to do in case something like that happens. Like, we did watch birth videos, and like for me, like the birth videos are like, they weren't as helpful, I think. It was just like mostly the books. But I think like, I don't know, in my mind I was just like, you know, like no matter how much I read or like look at these like birth videos, like I can like put this information and I can try to store it inside, but like really it's just gonna come down to like, you know, just having to go through it.
Yeah,
you know?
like in the moment.
Like in the moment,
Yeah.
you know? So I think like a part of me was like, okay, like I'm gonna study, but also like, you know, the chances of everything going exactly as we planned it, it's probably like not that high. So like, I mean, do I think I was as prepared as I could have been? No, but I mean, at the end of the day, everything worked out, you know, thank God, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yes. So what was going through your mind when I began active labor and I started to get surges more frequently and stronger?
So the kids were gone. Thankfully, my parents were able to watch them. So that helped a bunch because it was just you and me, and we got to spend, some time together
Yeah.
alone, and that was like very helpful because I couldn't even imagine like my nerves if like the kids were there. Like I think I would have like completely freaked out. So it was nice to spend time with you before like everything was about to go down, and like everything started picking up in the morning, and in my head, I don't know why, but like when everything started picking up for me, like in my head I thought we had like the whole day, like this is gonna be like a whole day event. So I was like, okay, here we go, like this is gonna be like all day. So thankfully we got to get a good night's sleep the night before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was kind of like inner like panicking because I knew like it was just like a matter of time before it was gonna be time to like deliver this baby, and I didn't know what that was gonna look like. I didn't know. Obviously, it was just it was very nerve-wracking. I was so nervous. Like I think that no matter how much you prepare, study, when things are actually happening, you're just gonna be that way because to see you in pain and knowing like what your body's about to go through, it's like it just is something in you where it's like it doesn't feel right, like, and as you like started dilating more and it started getting more intense, you had started bleeding, and obviously seeing you bleed, it's like I know it's normal. I can tell myself that like it's normal, but at the same time it's like it makes you very uncomfortable to see. It made me very uncomfortable to see you bleeding. And to me, like, it seemed like a lot, even though it wasn't. It was like perfectly normal.
Right.
But to me, I'm like, oh, like I don't know, this is like normal amount of like bleeding. And in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, if you're bleeding right now, like, then we still have like so much more time to go. Because in my head, I'm thinking like this is gonna be like a slow process. It's not gonna go fast. So I'm like, you're already bleeding, like, oh my gosh, like. And you're just bleeding. I'm like, you're gonna be bleeding for hours. Like, what's gonna go on?
I was already pushing at that
point. But I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware you were pushing. I'm just thinking like, oh yeah, you're just dilating. But why are you bleeding if you're dilating? Like, obviously not as informed as I could have been. But like I said, you never know how you're gonna react in the moment. And so I was like trying to keep calm, and so I had.
Yeah, you did a good job at that.
I tried to stay calm as best as I could. And I think I messaged your doula, because you were like in the bathroom, and when you had gotten out of the bathroom, that's when you started bleeding on the pads that we had put down. Mm-hmm. And so then you walked to the bedroom, and so we were in the bedroom, and you were like leaking blood. So I'm like starting to like kind of worry. I'm like, I don't know if this is normal. So then I think I took a picture and I sent it to the doula. And then I asked her, like, hey, is this like a normal amount of blood? And she got back to me saying, like, oh, yeah, it is. So that, like, comforted me a lot to just know that, like, okay, this is normal.
Yeah. And so, yeah, during that time, too, you were very supportive. Like, just in our rhythm, I feel like we get into this rhythm when I'm in labor where you're very, like you know the right moments to, like, give me a hug or touch me or ask me questions, which was really nice. And so we were already in that rhythm. I was already in labor land, and listening to my worship music really, I feel like it really progressed my labor because I felt so connected to God in that space, and it was so beautiful to experience. So you're right, like once I, Hey, mister. You want to see over there? Huh? Once I had gotten out of the bathtub and into the room, I was progressing very quickly. I was already pushing for, like, my body started to push around 1 o'clock. And let's talk about that. So when I was already pushing and you saw all the blood coming out, what did you think, like, after, when you said you got scared because you thought you saw something? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so obviously we had studied the books, and one thing that like stuck in the back of my mind was like reading that like during birth, if the umbilical cord came out before the baby, so like if you see the umbilical cord coming out before the baby, then that means it's a serious emergency.
Yeah.
So that kind of like stuck in my mind. So when you had left from the bathroom to the bedroom, and I had just got done messaging your doula, she said everything was fine. You were like on all fours, and you were pushing, but I didn't know at the time. I just thought like, oh, you're dilating. And so then I started to see like something come out, and in my mind, like everything's happening super fast. So in my mind, I'm like, that's the umbilical cord, cause it was like it had like a white it was like this white looking like mucus thing, and I think it just turned out to be mucus after all. But at the moment, I just see something coming out of you, and it's like going down. And like, I know what an umbilical cord looks like. It was not an umbilical cord, but in my mind, because everything was happening so fast, and I just saw like what kind of looked like the shape of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, the worst is happening, and the umbilical cord is coming out, and we have this big emergency, and I don't know what to do, and I'm freaking out. So I think I touched it like, oh my god, baby, the umbilical cord's coming out, like, I don't know what to do, and yeah, I mean...
You were not freaking out, by the way.
I felt like I was freaking out.
You were not freaking out. You're like, okay, well, the umbilical cord is coming out. What do you want to do? And by that time, the baby was almost out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you better call 911 because he's coming. And like within 2 pushes, after me saying that, he was here.
Yeah, so she had told me like, if you're gonna call 911, you better, do it now. And then I forgot what else she had said to me, but
that's all I said to you.
But after that, like, I think I was gonna start texting. I think I was gonna send like a message to your doula again. But at that moment, that what I thought was the umbilical cord, it went away because then you started bleeding a lot more. So then on my head, I'm like, okay, that's not the umbilical cord because it just dropped, and it's not good. That's not gonna happen if it was the umbilical cord. So like in my mind, I'm like, okay, what's happening? And then you start like pushing and grunting really hard.
Are you reenacting?
Yeah. So what I thought was the umbilical cord, it goes away because you're like bleeding a bunch more. And like you're really pushing, but in my mind I'm still like not expecting the baby to be here in like less than 2 minutes. So then you start pushing, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at you, and then I start to see something happening. I'm like, wait a minute, and I think you gave it like another good push, and then all of a sudden I see his head. And I'm like, I see the head. And you're like, what? I'm like, I see the head. And like literally, like I don't even know how many pushes. I think it was like 2 more like good pushes. Another push, and then like his head's coming out more. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And you're like grunting, and it's like getting like super like crazy. I'm like, okay, here we go. And you give it one last good push, and he just comes straight out, so like just so quick. And I'm like, have my hands right here and I catch him and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't even believe like it just happened, like in less than like probably less than 2 minutes, like from being worried to like then the baby's here, and it was just like so incredible and it caught me so off guard.
So when he was finally here, we rested a little bit, and then my placenta was not delivered, and then after 2 hours I finally delivered the placenta.
Yeah.
But you were still on a good adrenaline rush for those 2 hours.
Yeah, so when I finally was holding the baby, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay, so I think I like put him, I think he came, so I put him like, I had my hand, I was holding him, and I was like kind of just patting him because like I read like they might have like liquid in their mouth or something, so I just wanted to get that out of him and make sure like he was okay and he was breathing and he was crying, make sure everything was okay, and you know he was breathing fine. He like coughed some stuff out, but I saw that he was breathing and heard that he was crying, so then I gave him to you. And I was just like at that point, I think I gave him to you, and I just want to make sure for you to make sure that he was good. So I gave him to you as like a second inspection to make sure everything's okay. And yeah, everything was okay. But like you said, you know, my adrenaline was still going because it's like I said, like no matter how much you like read about a home birth and you see the videos, it's very different when you're in that situation. And who knows, I mean, maybe somebody else would be calm and collected, but for me, like for sure my adrenaline was going and I was kind of like all the way up here, but like I tried to like keep my composure. So I feel like after when kind of things settled down and you were holding him, and I think I kind of just went into like, okay, well now let's kind of clean up a little bit. So I went into like clean up mode. And yeah, so like I went into cleanup mode, just like washing my hands, gathering up like all the pads that had blood and just trying to clean up a little bit so things didn't look so chaotic. And then I think after that I want to go lay down with you. And then we realized that, you know, like your placenta still has to come out, which I think I had forgot at the moment. I'm like, oh yeah, your placenta has to come out. And so we were just waiting for your placenta to come out, and so we were kind of like a little bit worried because it wasn't coming out yet.
I think it wasn't, I think I was afraid because I didn't want to birth. After I already gave birth and I was like, oh, I'm just so done and I have to push this out, and then I remember once I said that, the placenta came out.
Yeah.
So I was like, so relieved, and then, you know, we just bonded as a family, and that was it.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to share? Any final thoughts?
I mean, like, honestly, it was a very special, a very just something you can't really like explain how it really feels because you have to experience it for yourself, like to deliver your own baby. And you know, I'm grateful that we did it, and I'm grateful that everything turned out the way it did. It's very special, like especially like when I look at, you know, Caleb, I'm just thinking like, dang dude, I like delivered you myself, you know, and I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm just, you know, you just had this idea and you were, you know, just bent on it, and I'm like, alright, this is what we're doing, and like we pulled it off, together, and it just shows that like if you're on the same page as your partner and you believe in your partner, that like you guys can do anything. And I think that now I don't believe that like it's like necessary to have a birth at the hospital unless you're like you're like predisposed to some kind of problems. But with that said, like, if we were to have another kid, would it be easier to have it at a hospital? I mean, yeah, because you don't have to do anything, you know, you're just there to support your partner. But it's not going to be the same as like delivering your baby yourself and like being able to tell somebody like, hey, you know that kid, I delivered him myself. And I always get a kick out of like people's reactions when I tell them that. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, we had a home birth. And so it's like something where people are like super intrigued and like they can't believe it. But it's like, no, you know, I did it myself. And it's something that I'm proud of.
You did it?
I did it. I did it. I delivered him. You gave birth to him. I delivered him. I caught him and gave him to you. But yeah, it's just crazy what you can do if you like believe in yourself. So
with God
yeah,
too.
and with God too, you know, thankfully that, you know, everything went well. But yeah, I think that's like my whole thoughts on it. It was a cool experience, and I'm just glad that we got to do it together. I think it brought us closer.
Definitely.
And the moments that we were able to share, you know, in bed together, and to just rest, just that, I think is like so important, because at a hospital you're not going to be able to rest as well as we did. You're going to be, if you're a dad, if you're you're going to be on the couch, uncomfortable. People are going to wake you up, you know, to do checks on the baby. And so like with Lilith, with our first, like I guess I wasn't too prepared for that, like not realizing how tired I was going to be at the hospital. But with this birth, it was just like, after everything was just so smooth, and we got to rest, relax, and it was just awesome. It was an awesome experience.
Yes. Well, thank you for being the first guest on my podcast. And if you liked this episode, please like and subscribe for more videos. Bye!